Hello vlog. So welcome back to the very last vlog that I will ever be doing in your class, except maybe I'll be doing more next semester. I don't know. Anyway, so this is my reflection on my UDL lesson. So just quick basics. I did a science lesson and it was 30 minutes long and it was about properties of matter, and it was for 18 students in a 3rd grade classroom at North Graham Elementary. So there are just all the basics for you. Hello, so let's talk about the people who are in my classroom. So I have 18 students, 2 have IEPs. I have 3 English language learners. However, one of them is to the point where he just moved here and really does not speak any English. So most of the communication that he does is either with other students in his class who speak Spanish or through a translator. I know a little bit of Spanish, so I've been able to work with him some, but not to the point where we always are understanding each other. And then my students who have IEPs actually leave the classroom during the day, go to pull-out classes or pull-out activities, and we even have a special ed, like extra EC person come into our classroom during some parts of the day to be of assistance and specifically work with those students, as well as work with other students in the classroom who may not technically have an IEP or a 504, but could just benefit from working with an adult. So the first thing that I kind of want to talk about is kind of how I pre-planned this lesson. So I wanted to make sure that by the end of the lesson, every single student could name an example of a state of matter. And I know that sounds actually more complicated than explaining it. However, after listening to my students and seeing them kind of just interact with other science lessons and other math lessons, thinking of examples is something that they are more able to do, and it comes to them more naturally because they know what it is, but they don't necessarily know how to explain it. So I thought this would be a good starting point that they can give an example of each of the states of matter, because when I had kind of just talked to them in general about what my lesson was going to be about, they were like, oh, I kind of know what that is. And then when they said they knew what it was, they would give an example. So it was something that some students already could do before the lesson, but I thought it would be a good starting point to kind of gain some knowledge about what these different states of matter are. So when looking at representation, one of the things that I really wanted to focus on was making sure that when we were talking about states of matter, it was something that they are able to either see in real life, know about in terms of molecules, and then also just kind of think about the different aspects of life that are all around us, like what I can't do when I'm walking near a wall. I can't walk through it. I can't drink pencils. I can't have a toy made out of orange juice, those kinds of things. I think all of those 3 things kind of go into representation because you're able to talk about the states of matter in 3 different ways. And hopefully one of those ways is something that students can connect to and really connect with how their brain works and understand better. I know for me, thinking about it in terms of molecules is a lot more difficult than thinking about it oh, well, I can't have a toy that's made out of orange juice. That makes sense to me. I know that that's not something that's going to be a solid, and I understand that that's a liquid because of the form that it takes. So kind of looking at that was something that I wanted to do with representation. And then for engagement, I wanted them to be able to talk about the different noticings that they have and talk about the wonderings that they have, and kind of have it to where it doesn't have to strictly be about science. They can say oh, I know that a wall is really hard, and that's something that kind of makes me think of solid, but I don't really know what it means. And so they're able to have all of these thoughts and these noticings and feelings about what they're learning about, and it doesn't have to be the most scientific thing that's ever happened. But if that's the way that their brain works and that's what they want to do and that's the best way for them to engage with the information, then they can do that. And then for expression, I wanted them to have all of their thoughts in one place, because I know for me, organization as a child was so difficult, and some students are really great at it and some are not, but just putting it all in one place was going to be really cool. But with that, I wanted them to be able to express their thoughts in so many different ways. So we did movement, we did written things, we orally talked about it, we drew pictures. So we made sure that there were all these different ways that they could actually express and reflect on the information that they were. So kind of going along with that, Some of the things that I had in my lesson was we had bags of ice that they were able to look at and kind of just make observations, notice things about, and kind of say what they saw, what they see, what they feel. And so that was just kind of a cool way for them to be able to get comfortable with the information. So I kind of liked that idea of it, and I think it went really well, and they really enjoyed being able to reflect in that sort of way and think about the information, but not specifically in like the terms of science, and like more just as a way to explore what solids and liquids and gases are. And so during the lesson, we went through a PowerPoint, and basically we just talked about the information. We did a lot of turn and talks. We did a lot of think, pair, shares. And we just kind of had a discussion, honestly. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to give them information, but I also wanted them to come up with information, like what they knew, what they thought about when they think about these things. And I think they've learned about it in like second and first grade, but like very vaguely. But so using that vague information and building on it with each other as students as a community was really important for me. And that kind of goes into like creating a community throughout the entire lesson, and like just in the space, to make sure that every single student feels safe and like they can say what they're thinking without feeling judged, and like creating an environment that values every single person's opinions and thoughts, and making sure that everyone's just comfortable. So kind of looking more at the like reflective lens of UDL, I was honestly so intimidated by it at first. It's just a lot of thinking that goes into a lesson plan, and a lot of planning, and honestly thinking about every single one of your students and like recognizing what they might need, what they might want, what might even just like help them even if they don't know that they need that, and kind of looking at also how that can help other students, and kind of just how that also reflects into your classroom and other practices. So I was definitely very overwhelmed at the beginning. However, like through this, I felt like it really opened my eyes to see how much better this can make a lesson in general, not just for the one student with an IEP, not for my one English language learner, for every single student. With using UDL, I really wanted to make sure that every single student felt like they were able to, I keep saying connect, but connect to the information and make it something to where they feel like at the end of the day, they're gonna remember this because of this one thing that we did, whether it was the body movements, whether it was the writing it down, whether it was the drawing, whether it was looking at the pictures / videos, like all of that. I wanted them to just like think of one thing that they would take away from it. And I think using UDL is such a beneficial tool because it helps every single student. And I keep saying it, but it's just so true. Like I think me as a student in elementary school who like had an undiagnosed like disability, like this, using these kind of strategies could have helped me as a learner so much. And I was lucky enough to be like a gifted student to where like I was able to like understand the content, but like just these strategies to help students organize their thoughts so much better and like feel more comfortable in the space with the information that they know, and building on all of the information that they're learning, I think could be so beneficial to creating an environment where students feel like they are getting something out of the knowledge. And going on with that, there are so many students in my classroom who like I would have thought would have had an IEP or a 504 or some sort of accommodations or something. However, they don't, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but as a teacher, it's our job to recognize that and say, okay, this student might not be eligible for these certain things, but that doesn't mean that they don't need them, and that doesn't mean that they won't help them. And so recognizing that and putting into your lesson is going to help that one student who like maybe has a few attention like needs and where they need to be kept more on top of it, or the student who thinking about it in terms of just very scientific ways is not going to be beneficial for them, and they're just not going to get the content in the same way as if you talk about it like walls or toys or things that you drink. Like using all of those strategies helps students feel more comfortable with the information and honestly feel more motivated to learn. I think that's one big thing that I learned from using UDL. One thing that I specifically wanted to talk about was, I know that we had talked so much about how ELL students get IEPs, and you know, it's kind of difficult because you don't know if like it's a language barrier or if it's actually a learning disability that is right now just being covered up by the fact that they still can't speak the same language. And so, you know, one of my students, he is incredibly smart, and when I'm talking to him in Spanish or when we're translating what he's saying and what he's thinking, he's got it down. But it is so hard for him right now to access the information that's being given to him because he doesn't really have any accommodations in place. And I was talking to my teacher about it, and he was like, oh yeah, it's, you know, we don't really do IEPs or 504s for students who are ELLs. And that just kind of confused me because, you know, we had talked about it so much in class, but I realized, like, even if he didn't have an IEP or an ELL, which he doesn't, there are still so many things you can do in the classroom to make it more accessible to him by using pictures, by using videos, and by, you know, having someone who speaks his language working with him and kind of helping him, you know, translating just even the questions so that they're able to talk about everything in Spanish in their native language, but to where that they're actually able to really get the information. And I think that was a pretty cool thing. One of the last things I want to talk about is, like, I really enjoyed doing this, but I did in no way do this perfectly, and it was such a learning curve for me, but it makes me want to do it a lot more. Like, I want this to be something that every single lesson plan that I do for the next however many years that I teach, I make sure that it's accessible to every single student, that there are things in place that are going to help this one student, but they also might help those 4 other students over there who don't even know that they need it. And I think, you know, there's so many little things that, like, I thought about after doing my lesson that I was like, oh, this would have been really great. Oh, this would have been really great. But that's the whole point of, like, taking classes like this, is learning how to use the information that we're getting, putting it into practice, and then recognizing, oh, I didn't do that all right, and redoing it and doing it and doing it over again. And so I'm really excited for, you know, my next semester placement, where I'm gonna have a lot of time to work on making my lessons UDL and making everything that I do beneficial to every single student. So thank you for watching the very last vlog of the semester. I really enjoyed using UDL, and I'm really hoping that it's something that continues to stay in my life, and it will be, because I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna implement it. Anyway, thank you and peace out.